Hello, and welcome to A Woman's Heart. I'm Lisa Granger. There is no guest today, so it is going to be you and me and a message that God has been working on with me for a while. If you listen regularly, you may remember that I like to have a word of the year. And God has me sticking around with the word healing again this year. Earlier this year, I shared a message called Soak, Wrap, Repeat: How to Heal from the Inside Out. I've also shared messages about the woman who was bleeding for 12 years. Then I named it Take Heart, Daughter. Also had lessons on healing in Matthew and activating your faith for healing and wholeness. Each lesson God has taught me has been very meaningful, and this one is no different. Now, fair warning. This message may be a bit of a challenge. It has definitely challenged me. Unless you are one of these rare people that has it all together, in which case, could you please contact me? Because I would love to know your secret, and I would be happy to have you as a guest on the show so you can share everyone else your secret of having it all together. After I studied the woman who had been bleeding for 12 years, I remember praying that God would reveal the next story that He wanted me to look at. And He brought the man at the Pool of Bethesda to mind with the question, "Do you want to get well?" And then He asked me the same question. Well, my word of the year is healing. So, of course, I want to be well. That's why I'm studying healing, and that's why I'm studying healing stories. That's why I have a life coach. And I'm very fortunate to have some friends that have counseling experience, and they tell me I'm normal, at least most of the time. But then he asked me again, "Do you really want to be healed? Are you really willing to do the work and make changes so that you can be healed on a deeper level and fully live the life that I have for you in abundance?" I don't know about you, but when I let that sink in, that is a hard question. It's a question that's not just about healing, it's about transformation, a potentially life-changing question, and one that we need to take seriously. So, as we dive into this story, ask yourself the question: do you want to get well? Are you willing to do what it takes to get well, whether that is physically, mentally, emotionally, or spiritually? I'm going to read the story in John chapter 5, verses 1 through 9, and then I'm going to dive in and share some of the things that God has been sharing and showing me using the word well, W-E-L-L. We're going to dive into that later. But for now, John chapter 5, verses 1 through 9. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethsaida, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people, lame, blind, paralyzed, waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he already had been in that condition a long time, he said to him, "Do you want to be made well?" The sick man answered him, "Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I'm coming, another steps down before me." Jesus said to him, "Rise, take up your bed and walk." And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed, and walked. Now, with only the words, it's hard to hear the inflections of the man's voice or Jesus' voice, and we don't have the benefit of any body language or facial expressions. Maybe did this man think Jesus was someone who was going to judge him for being ill? A lot of times people were blamed. They said if they had a sickness, it must be something they did. They must have done something wrong. There must be sin in their life. That's why they're being punished. And along with the infirmity, they had the shame and the guilt of everything being heaped on top of them for something that may not have anything to do with what they've done. Was he offended at Jesus' question? Was he making excuses for why he hadn't managed to scooch his way to the edge of the pool over the years? Was he embarrassed? Did he feel shame or guilt over something that happened in the past? Was he blaming other people for this situation? Or maybe the man was just stating the obvious. He didn't have any help. He had no family, friends, church, or community support. Maybe he was frustrated because, yes, he wanted to be well, but the only way he saw that happening was for someone to help him into the water and receive a miracle. He didn't know of a different way to get better. Now, we don't know the answers to all these questions, and we don't necessarily even know why Jesus asked him that question. Maybe, and I suspect, Jesus wanted to make sure the man knew that he was seen and that Jesus cared enough to ask him what he wanted. Maybe Jesus wanted to have permission to heal him. Revelation 3:20 says, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person and they with me." Jesus didn't say he was going to knock the door down and barge in. He will not force himself on anyone. We have free will to say no, which comes to the W in well, our first letter. And the W stands for willing to change. We must be willing to change. If we want something different, we have to do something different. Sometimes the biggest barrier to a new life isn't our circumstances, but our willingness to change. They say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Healing often begins with a willingness, desire, or a decision, a willingness to change something in our life, maybe receive help, obey what we are told to do, or trust again. There's an action involved. But as much as it seems like wanting to be healed is a no-brainer, we can be resistant. I can remember a time when I was little. I was about 5 years old, which puts my brother at about a year old. So he's toddling about. I had this brand new orange record player, like the suitcase kind, for those of you that can remember that. It would play 33s or 45s. Well, I am busy listening to my records on my brand new record player, and here comes my brother crawling across the floor. Well, I didn't want my brother to have anything to do with my record player. I didn't want him to break anything or mess it up. So I proceeded to pick him up, scoop him up, and start going across the room to get him away from my record player. Well, in the meantime, I kind of lost my balance and I fell. Fortunately, my brother didn't have far to go. I didn't have too far to go either, except that my ear landed on the very edge of the coffee table and split my ear in half. Needless to say, I was very unhappy. I was in a lot of pain. I was screaming and crying. Mom takes me to the doctor. They had to hold me down to put the stitches in my ear. I still have a little scar. I was resistant. I was very resistant to what needed to happen in order to help me heal. And sometimes, I hate to say it, but I still end up kicking and screaming against what God would have me to do when God's trying to stitch things up or dig around in some ugly root in my life. I am not happy about it. And sometimes he kind of has to talk a little sternly. Because, yeah, I am. I'm right back to that 5-year-old kicking and screaming because it hurts. I don't want this. It hurts. But that's what needs to happen sometimes in order to heal. Otherwise, my ear would have probably done, kept going and split and would have looked really weird. Wouldn't have looked nearly as good for my earrings anymore. But when Jesus asked if he wants to get well, it's actually a valid question. Was the man willing to steward his healing? Was he willing to make changes to his life? Now, back then, begging was a profession. So if the man was healed, he would have to find another means of supporting himself. This is what he had been doing for 38 years. This was all he had known for 38 years. There's nothing to say that he knew of a trade beforehand. And even if he did, he hadn't been practicing it for 38 years. He would have to find another way to support himself. He'd have to learn a craft or a trade or somebody to teach him something, or he'd have to change his whole lifestyle. That's pretty scary. Change is scary, but having to redo and rethink everything about how you have lived your life for many, many years, that can kind of terrify us and just help us freeze. The man probably recognized the magnitude of the question, and he probably kind of thought about it because he didn't say yes right away. He started listing excuses for why he isn't already healed. He doesn't have any help. Somebody gets ahead of him. It's someone else's fault. And how often do we do the same thing? I know I have. I have made excuses. I've blamed other people. I've thrown very elaborate pity parties, balloons, confetti, the whole thing. I have thought about all of the things that I didn't have enough of as an excuse to maybe not even try. Then again, there's also the possibility the man was just plain old hopeless. After 38 years, he just couldn't even bear the thought of hoping for healing. Needless to say, like, voice it. Go, yes, I want to be healed. He may have been too afraid to even think that, much less say it. And I have compassion on that. He's been there for 38 years. That's a long time to feel hopeless and helpless and trying and yet just not having it help. But yet he was still at the pool. One of the things that I thought while I was putting this together was, have you ever heard someone complain about something? And then when someone offers a solution, their response is all the reasons why that won't work. I've done that myself, and it drives my want to fix it husband absolutely bananas. And that kind of comes in. Jesus is offering him a solution. But the man by the pool, he's like, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to work. There's a quote by Tony Robbins that says, change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. So, how painful is staying the same? I was reading Alicia Michelle's book, Emotional Confidence, and that was a fabulous conversation. If you haven't heard it, please go and check out that conversation that I had with Alicia Michelle about her emotional confidence. But I read a quote there. She had a section, and I knew that I was going to be putting this show together. And I think it sums up so much of this. And she writes, at the Pool of Bethesda, Jesus asked a crippled man an interesting question. Do you want to get well? We can say we want wholeness and emotional resolution, but are we willing to do what it takes to get it? Are we willing to quit our excuses, leave our pity parties, these warm, comfortable places, pick up our proverbial mats, and walk as Jesus challenged this man to do? There's a truth in here. It says your next season may depend on your willingness to walk away from your current one, even if it's familiar. Well, perhaps we are willing to change, but we just don't see how to do it. We've tried some things, they haven't worked, and we don't know what else to do or where to go. Maybe we need to change our expectations. This comes to the E in well. Expect the unexpected. Expand our possibilities. When we think of expansion, it kind of reflects a shift in our mindset, maybe our identity and the possibility after healing. This man was limited by what he had seen. All he knew was that the water would stir up and that he had to get in the water. That was the only thing he saw. That was the only option he saw. It's a very narrow thing. He couldn't comprehend another way of healing. I don't know how many of you have watched The Chosen. I cried when I saw this scene. In The Chosen, the man was injured as a child and could no longer walk. And his brother would take him around in a cart. And one day the brother leaves. I won't get into all of that, but the man is alone with no family, somehow makes his way to the pool, and year after year, he tries to get into the water when it gets stirred up. He just doesn't get there in time. And this happens over and over. And in the series of Chosen, you see him kind of going from this, he's trying really hard and he's so animated, he's trying so hard, and he just can't get it. And then he tries again. And then you see where he's kind of trying and it's not working. And he kind of tries. And then he's older and he's dirtier. He's more ragged. And the water stirs up and he kind of lifts his head up and then he just kind of lays it back down. He's already given up again. He's there, but he just doesn't have the energy to keep trying and keep hoping. And he's beginning to wonder why he's even there anymore. Why does he keep staying there? But he doesn't have anywhere else to go. What else is he going to do? The man was looking for healing in the water, but healing came through Jesus. It never occurred to him that some stranger would come up and ask him if he wants to get well and then heal him with the words, "Get up, take up your mat, and go." God often answers prayers in ways we don't expect. Something else that I would like to point out that really kind of blew my mind. There was a note in my Nelson Study Bible about verse 13. It said the sick man was healed without exercising any faith. He didn't know who Jesus was when he was healed. Now, when I read that he was healed without even knowing who Jesus was, wow. Do you understand what that means for us? For you? The man didn't have to exercise any faith to be healed. He didn't have to clean up or beg for days. Jesus found the man where he was at, helpless, dirty, sick, and laying on the ground. Please hear me when I say you don't have to clean yourself up before going to Jesus. He will meet you where you are at and love you as you are. We read so many other stories of Jesus healing, and they come to him believing he can heal them. The woman with the issue of blood believed she could be healed by just touching the fringe of his prayer shawl, and Jesus responds, "Your faith has made you well." But this man didn't believe Jesus could heal him. He didn't know who Jesus was. He had no idea who this guy was. The man only knew that he could walk after the stranger told him to get up and walk. It wasn't until much later, after talking to the religious leaders, that the man knew it was Jesus who healed him. All the man had to do was obey Jesus' command to get up, pick up his mat, and walk. That's when he received the healing. He took Jesus at his word and did it. He obeyed and put it into action. We never know how our healing may come or when. Jesus never seems to heal the same way. Just as we are unique individuals, Jesus' healing comes in a unique package. Even if our healing doesn't happen how we imagine, it doesn't mean that it's not possible or in a different way. Jesus brings a new paradigm, healing through his word. Are you open to a new method, a new mindset, a new move of God? I happen to like the movie Facing the Giants. We've seen it a couple of times in our house. We've shown it to our kids. We've given out many, many copies when it first came out on those DVD things that some people may remember. There's a scene where there's a man who will go down the hall and he's praying for all the students. And he's been doing this for years. And he comes into the coach's office, Grant. Grant's not having a good day. Everything seems to just be falling apart. People are trying to take his job, kick him out. He and his wife are having infertility issues. His star player is gone. Just everybody has a bad attitude and they're just down. It's just not good. And in walks Mr. B, guy that's been praying, and he says, I have a word for you that God gave me. And he reads Revelation 3, verses 7 and 8. He said, what he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. I know your deeds. See, I have placed you before an open door that no one can shut. Tells him that God has opened a door and he is to bloom where he is planted. Now that's kind of hard to hear because, as I said, Grant was feeling really pretty discouraged and nothing's going right. And sometimes we can be discouraged too. Our plans are not going the way we want. We are striving for a goal that seems so elusive. We are struggling with a chronic illness. We are praying for a family member who just keeps running away from God, Caregiving is draining us. Health, relationships, loss, finances. There is an endless list of things that can just suck the energy out of us. We may not like where we are planted, and it feels like the manure is getting piled on. Now, it's easy to say that the manure is good fertilizer for growth when you aren't dry heaving from the smell. I think this scene spoke to me in reference to this passage and theme because part of getting well may be using all that manure that life throws at us to grow and bloom where we are planted. Maybe we are stuck in a tragic situation, but we can still encourage those around us. We can offer a sacrifice of praise for who God is despite our circumstances. We can grip our faith tighter and learn to trust in God's character and his timing and be obedient in the small things. Now, I'm going to admit, I have some big dreams and I get frustrated and I get overwhelmed that these things don't seem to be happening like I want. I want to grow my podcast. I have so many great guests. I want more people to hear them and hear their stories and what they have to share. I have a desire to write, maybe speak. Maybe I shouldn't be saying this to everybody out loud, but I can barely seem to take care of what I have. What am I thinking? I look around and I see others who can do this and seem to do more, and I am really, truly happy for them. They're wonderful people and they have worked hard, and I celebrate with them. But then sometimes I do kind of compare and I was like, why not me? What what is it? Why not me? But rather than sit and sulk and make excuses that I don't have enough help, or I don't have enough time, or enough knowledge, or enough Facebook followers, or whatever, I can do the best I can with where I am at the moment. I can bloom where I am planted, which is healing. It's a changing in my mindset. It's a different way of looking at it. So even if my circumstance hasn't changed, my behavior and my attitude can, and the wounds can heal. The questions and the doubts and the frustrations, they can heal. Now, a new life does require new expectations, and God may not meet your expectations, but He will exceed them. Now, along with the W, willing to change, and E, expect the unexpected. The next letter is L. We're going to kind of double up here because this L is going to be let go and launch forward. Chances are we need to let go of some of that baggage that is weighing us down. We need to let go of past mistakes, patterns of behavior that no longer serve us, negative attitudes, you name it. There's a long list. Now, in Heather Kaufman's book, Before the King, she tells the story of Joanna. That was another amazing conversation that you should check out. That will be coming up in our summer reading series. Joanna is mentioned twice in the Bible. She was healed in some way. We don't know exactly how, but she financially supports Jesus' ministry, and she was one of the women at the tomb on Easter. We don't know any other details, but Heather's story of Joanna's healing was powerful, and I believe a God wink since I was reading it while preparing this lesson. In the story, Joanna has injured her leg in a tragic accident and left with a limp, along with a Colosseum-sized load of guilt and shame. When she meets Jesus and he offers healing, she struggles for a while, believing that she isn't worthy. I underlined this part in the book. It says, in his pointed question, I recognized a new responsibility. Healing would require a new way of thinking of myself and of my past. She finally responds to him, I I think I need to be changed on the inside before I'm changed on the outside. Now, whether this account of Joanna's healing is true or not, we can still learn from it. And I think it's very believable. We do sometimes hold on to old wounds and habits and labels out of guilt or shame. Have you ever sabotaged yourself or refused to accept healing that is offered because maybe you felt like you needed to keep paying for it? Maybe you don't deserve it. Do we believe that others can receive healing, but for whatever reason we can't? Do we need to let go of those wounds the shame, and the destructive thoughts. Now, I'm not saying there won't be any consequences to choices that we have made or that we can very easily toss aside all this baggage sometimes. But we have the benefit of the Holy Spirit in us. Jesus died on a cross and paid the price so that we can be forgiven. We don't have to keep paying. Jesus has already paid. We can give all the mess and the garbage to God and run into his arms like the prodigal son or daughter and then party with the king. There's another scene in Facing the Giants that always gets me, always gets me. They're at practice and they're bemoaning that the big game's coming up and they're already convinced that they're going to lose. And so the coach is trying out a new theory of we're not just going to be in this to win a couple football games. We're going to do this to like do life better. And he says, I have a challenge for you. And he pulls the captain of the team out and he says, I want you to do a death crawl for 30 yards, which it's this exercise where you basically you're walking on your hands and you kind of on all fours. And he has somebody on his back. And then he says, but I'm going to blindfold you because I don't want you giving up too soon when you think you've gone far enough. He's like, I want you to promise me to do your best. He's like, oh, okay. So as the scene progresses, he hits the 30 and he keeps going because he doesn't know where he is on the field. Coach Kes, come on, keep going, keep going. He hits the 50. He hits the 75 and he's like, this is hard. And coach says, you give me everything. You give me everything. Finally, he just collapses. He's like, I've given everything. I don't have any more. And the coach says, look up. You're in the end zone. And he goes on to say, you have so much more to give, that God has gifted you with something and you need to share it with others. You are a leader. You affect those around you. And we have to give it our all. Now, how often do you maybe give up a little too easily? I understand there can be wisdom in cutting your loss sometimes, but how often do you give up the slightest bit of resistance because then you can have the excuse for why you failed? I'm asking because I'm guilty of that. I know what that feels like. I have done it. This is not an accusation from me to you because I am so guilty of it. Somewhere deep inside, I know that, well, maybe I didn't really try all hard because sometimes the idea of really throwing your heart over the bar, giving it everything, and then it not being good enough, that hurts. I remember a time I was in the JCs. I don't know who's heard of that, but it was the Junior Chamber of Commerce, a leadership training and service organization for people 21 to 40. That's my 30-second elevator speech on that. They had competitions that you could do at the local, state, and then all the way up to the national level. Well, I had won the regional one, I won the state, and so I went on to a national competition for Speak Up, and or it was a speaking competition. I worked really hard. I had my speech. I had former winners from the state coaching me. I practiced. I made sure I made what I was wearing was spot on. I had really practiced this and I had worked really hard and trying to make sure I had an impromptu speech as well. Well, everyone goes in and competes. I make it to the top 10. Great. So then you have to do your impromptu. And I thought I did a pretty good job. Well, then they come to announce the top three, and I wasn't one of them. And part of, you know, I did well. I'm really proud of what I did do. I was in the top 10 in the country, but I'm going to be honest, I wanted to win or at least make the top three so they would call my name and all that. But part of what really stung was that I really had tried. I had worked really, really hard and I still didn't get it. My best wasn't good enough. And that can hurt. It can be hard to try that again. Now, I know that a lot of you are going to say, well, that's silly. It's so much better to know that you gave everything and you left it all out there on the field. And I agree, but I also know the fear of failure is really powerful and it keeps us playing small at times. Sometimes Jesus will use that tough love and compassion to get us going. In the amplified version of the story, Jesus asks, are you really in earnest about getting well? Pick up, get up, pick up your bed and walk. Jesus doesn't sit and commiserate with the man and tell him how unfair it is that no one will help him or how wrong it is that he's been unwell for 38 years. And he doesn't blame him or condemn him for his condition either. Jesus cares enough to ask the man what he's thinking and then gives him a call to action. Now, maybe the guy, slowly given up and was having a pity party. Jesus knew that the man needed a physical healing before he could heal mentally. Some of us need an internal healing before the external can happen. That's the beauty of healing with Jesus. He knows what we need and when and in what order or to what degree. Now, it doesn't mean we always agree with it, but he does know what's best. Joyce Meyer writes in her Everyday Life Bible, Jesus knew self-pity would not deliver the man. So he did not feel sorry for him. He had compassion on him, and that is different from emotional pity. Jesus was not being harsh, hard, or mean. He was trying to set the man free. Jesus wants us free. God wants us free and healed so that we can launch into our purpose. He wants us to let go of all the shame and the blame and the excuses and the negative mentality so that we can go forward in our purpose. God doesn't waste anything. He will use our wounds and our brokenness to minister to others. Have you ever noticed that most of the powerful messages you hear come from someone who has overcome an obstacle? They've survived a tragic situation or they've endured suffering. Those things that we struggle with are exactly what God uses to help others. I am still working out some stuff with God, which is why He wanted me to share this message. I've grown over the years, but trust me, I don't have it all together yet. If I waited until I had it all figured out, though, I'm not sure I would share anything at all. I'd love to share this truth with you on this. Jesus doesn't just heal us, He launches us into purpose. So now we're at the last letter L. How you doing? You still with me? Do you still want to get well? Willing to change. Expect the unexpected. Let go and launch into purpose. And now live abundantly. John 10:10 says, I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. And living well, it's more than just a physical healing. It is spiritual, it is emotional, it is abundant, it is a wholeness. It's everything. It's not just being sad, but your body works well, or vice versa. Let God rewrite your story. The man had to pick up his mat and walk. He had to leave the old place behind before he could walk into a new one. Living well means walking in the truth of who you are now, not just who you used to be. Now, I do feel like I need to give a little bit of a disclaimer, and no, you aren't going to hear a fast talking person listing all the side effects of a drug or the restrictions on a contract. When I talk about living abundantly, I am not implying that you will win the lottery or be able to buy a fancy car. It's not about material riches or always getting your way. God is not Santa Claus. It's also not about receiving every physical healing. I know plenty of cases where there were many prayers for someone to be healed, but it didn't happen on this side of heaven, and the grief was crushing. This runs deeper. When Jesus told the man to pick up his mat and walk, it was not just a physical healing, it was a call to action. The man had to move, carry his own mat, and step into a new life. And he didn't walk off into a rosy sunset. He was immediately approached by the religious leaders who chastised him for working on the Sabbath, since Jesus had healed him on the Sabbath. But we get to tell a different story once we have received healing and start walking in it. Instead of a story of sickness for 38 years, the man had a story of healing in one moment. Perhaps your story was of a prodigal child that came home and was restored. Or maybe your story was the loss of a loved one. And now you can minister to others with more compassion and find joy in the midst of grief. Sometimes we hold on to old labels, broken, forgotten, overlooked. But Jesus gives us new names, healed, chosen, and whole. To live is not just an existence, it's purposeful movement. I love that phrase when I found it. Now, what would your life look like if you let God reframe your identity, redirect your path, and redeem your past? You think you could live fuller, live abundantly? Living a new life means no longer identifying with the old one. We get to walk into that new one and just live it out loud. So I'll ask you again, do you want to get well? Are you willing to change? Expect the unexpected. Let go of what needs to go so you can launch into your purpose and live abundantly. Are you willing to do what it takes to live that new life? Will you do what Jesus said? Get up, pick up your mat, and walk. I pray that this is not just a call to heal, but a call to be willing to transform your life, to transform your thinking and grab a hold of everything that God would have for you. No matter where that healing needs to be, I pray that you would be willing to grasp a hold of it because He's offering it. He wants us to be whole. He wants us to be healed. I want to thank you today for joining me on A Woman's Heart. I'm Lisa Granger, and I do pray that you are encouraged to do what it takes to get well and grab hold of everything that Jesus has for you. For the show notes with the links to some of the resources that I mentioned and previous shows on healing, you can go to my website, lisagranger.com. Make sure you stay tuned to later episodes because we are going to be starting our summer reading series next week. And I have thoroughly enjoyed reading these books and speaking with the authors. There are really some great books that I think you will enjoy reading on vacation or around the house or wherever for the summer and beyond. Until next time, have a blessed day.